Imagine you're 16 years old. You've just been invited to dine with the King of Scotland himself. The food is incredible, the wine is flowing, and you have every reason to believe you're being honoured. Then, without warning, a severed bull's head is placed on the table in front of you. That's the signal. Before you can even stand, you're dragged from the hall, given a mock trial that lasts minutes, and beheaded in the courtyard. That isn't fiction. That isn't Game of Thrones. That actually happened. And George R. Martin himself has said that Scotland's real history inspired one of the most shocking moments in television history, the Red Wedding. But here's the thing nobody talks about. The real events that inspired that scene, they were worse. They were so much worse. And today, we're going to talk about why. Before we dive into the real history, let's set the stage with what most of us know. If you've watched Game of Thrones or read A Storm of Swords, the Red Wedding is seared into your memory. Robb Stark, the king in the north, arrives at the Twins for the wedding of his uncle Edmure Tully to one of Walder Frey's daughters. It's supposed to be a celebration, a reconciliation. Robb had broken a marriage pact with the Freys, and this wedding is meant to mend that wound. But Walder Frey has other plans. Midway through the feast, the music changes. The doors are barred, and then the slaughter begins. Robb's wife Talisa is stabbed repeatedly in her pregnant belly. Robb is riddled with crossbow bolts, and Catelyn Stark, after watching her son die, has her throat cut from ear to ear. The scene violated one of the oldest and most sacred laws in both Westeros and our own medieval world. Guessed right. The idea that once you share bread and salt with your host, you are protected under their roof. Walder Frey broke that sacred contract, and it shocked audiences around the globe. Millions of viewers couldn't believe what they'd just watched. People filmed their friends and family reacting to the scene. It became a cultural phenomenon. But George R. Martin didn't pull this from thin air. He pulled it from Scottish history. And the truth is, history didn't just match the fiction. It exceeded it. Let's go back to Scotland, November 1440. King James II is on the throne, but he's only 10 years old. The real power behind the crown is held by Sir William Crichton, the Chancellor of Scotland, and Sir Alexander Livingston, the keeper of Edinburgh Castle. These two men are terrified of one family, the Douglases. The Douglas clan is one of the most powerful noble families in Scotland, and at this point in history, they arguably rival the crown itself in terms of military strength, land, and influence. The young Earl of Douglas, William Douglas, is only about 16 years old, but his name alone represents a threat to the men running the kingdom. So Crichton and Livingston come up with a plan. They invite the young Earl and his younger brother David to Edinburgh Castle to dine with the boy king. By all accounts, the dinner begins pleasantly. Young King James reportedly even enjoyed the company of the Douglas boys. They were close in age, they ate together, they talked. And then it happened. A great black bull's head was brought to the table and placed before the Earl of Douglas. In Scottish tradition, this was a symbol of death. The young Earl reportedly knew immediately what it meant. He and his brother were seized right there in the hall. They were dragged outside, subjected to a sham trial where the charges were practically invented on the spot, and then both boys were beheaded in the castle courtyard. Some accounts suggest that young King James himself pleaded for their lives and was ignored. He was a child after all. He had no real power. The men who ruled in his name had decided the Douglases had to die, and a dinner invitation was the weapon they chose. Now think about that in the context of the Red Wedding. A young king, a feast meant to signal peace, a powerful family lured into a trap under the sacred protection of hospitality, and then betrayal and murder right there at the table. The parallels are unmistakable. But Martin didn't stop with just one event. Fast forward about 250 years to February 1692. Scotland is a very different place now, but the capacity for betrayal under the roof of hospitality hasn't changed one bit. After the Glorious Revolution of 1688, King William III of England and Scotland demands that all Highland clan chiefs swear an oath of allegiance to him by January 1st, 1692. Most do. But the chief of the MacDonald clan of Glencoe, a man named Alistair MacIain, is late. He tries to swear the oath, but a series of bureaucratic obstacles and bad weather delay him. He finally swears it on January 6th, just days late. Now, a reasonable government might have accepted this, but powerful men in the Scottish government, particularly Sir John Dalrymple, the Secretary of State, see an opportunity. Dalrymple despises the Highland clans. He views them as barbarians, and the MacDonalds of Glencoe, a clan with a reputation for cattle raiding and general defiance, make a perfect example. So a plan is set in motion. On February 1st, 1692, around 120 soldiers from the Earl of Argyll's regiment of foot arrive in Glencoe. Many of these soldiers are Campbells, a clan with a long and bitter rivalry with the MacDonalds. But here's the critical detail. They don't come as enemies. They come asking for shelter and hospitality, claiming their barracks are full. And the MacDonalds, following the Highland tradition of hospitality that was considered sacred, absolutely sacred, take them in. For nearly 2 weeks, the soldiers live among the MacDonalds. They eat their food, they drink their whiskey. They sleep in their homes. They play cards with them by the fire. They become, for all appearances, guests and even something approaching friends. Then, in the early hours of February 13th, the order comes. The soldiers rise before dawn and begin the systematic murder of their hosts. The orders were explicit. All MacDonalds under the age of 70 were to be put to the sword. Men were shot in their beds. The clan chief, Old McCain, was killed while getting dressed, shot in the back. His wife was brutalized so savagely that she died the next day. Families were dragged into the freezing Scottish winter. Houses were burned. Around 38 people were killed directly in the massacre, but many more, possibly dozens, died of exposure in the following days as they fled into the mountains during one of the worst blizzards in living memory. Women, children, and the elderly froze to death in the snow because their homes had been burned behind them. And all of this was carried out by men who had been their guests. Men who had shared their food, their warmth, and their trust for 12 days. This wasn't just murder. This was a betrayal of everything Highland culture held sacred. It became a wound in Scottish memory that has never fully healed. To this day, there are places in Scotland where the Campbells are not welcome, and the phrase "murder under trust" entered Scottish law partly because of what happened at Glencoe. George R.R. Martin has spoken openly about both of these events in interviews. He's described how the Black Dinner gave him the idea of a shocking betrayal at a feast, the idea that you could be murdered at a table where you had been welcomed as a guest. And the massacre of Glencoe added the layer that makes it truly haunting, the slow, deliberate cultivation of trust before the killing blow. Walder Frey doesn't just attack the Starks, he welcomes them, he feeds them, he performs the bread and salt ritual. He gives them guest right. And then, only after that trust is established, does he unleash the massacre. That slow build-up, that weaponization of hospitality itself, that comes directly from Glencoe. Martin also combined these events with his own fictional elements. The political machinations of Tywin Lannister, the personal grievance of Walder Frey, the tragic romantic choices of Robb Stark. But the skeleton of the Red Wedding, the bones of it, are Scottish history through and through. So why do I say the real events were worse? Because fiction has limits that history doesn't. In Game of Thrones, the Red Wedding is horrible, but it's over quickly. It's one night, one terrible burst of violence, and then it's done. The Black Dinner involved the murder of teenagers, boys who were barely old enough to understand the political game that killed them, dragged out and beheaded after a trial that was pure theatre. And Glencoe involved 12 days of intimate personal trust-building before the killing. These weren't strangers being ambushed. These were people who had passed the bread, shared stories, and looked each other in the eye for nearly 2 weeks. Imagine having a houseguest for 12 days and then waking up to find them standing over your bed with a musket. And the aftermath of Glencoe included something no fiction could quite capture. The image of women and children stumbling through a blizzard in the Highlands, barefoot, watching their homes burn in the distance, slowly freezing to death because the mountains offered no shelter and no mercy. Robb Stark's death is devastating, but it's a scene. Glencoe was days and weeks of suffering that extended far beyond the initial massacre. Fiction can shock you. History can haunt you. And the history behind the Red Wedding is the kind of story that stays with you. Not because of how dramatic it is, but because it really happened to real people who had every reason to believe they were safe. History is full of moments like these. Moments that remind us that the most shocking fiction often can't hold a candle to what human beings have actually done to each other. The Red Wedding is iconic television. But the Black Dinner and the Massacre of Glencoe are real, and they deserve to be remembered, not just as inspirations for fantasy, but as events in their own right. Stories of trust and betrayal that shaped a nation's identity for centuries. If this video gave you a new appreciation for the history behind the fiction, hit that like button. It genuinely helps the channel more than you might think. If you're new here and you enjoy deep dives into the real history behind the stories we love, subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss the next one. And I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, which do you think was the greater betrayal? The Black Dinner or Glencoe? Or is there another historical betrayal you think tops both of them? I read every single comment, and some of the best video ideas come directly from you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.